Hi everyone, welcome to AALD's Portfolio Week. We like to start off with a land acknowledgement. So we at AALD wish to acknowledge this land on which the University of Toronto operates. For thousands of years, it has been the traditional land of the Huron-Wendat, the Seneca, and the Mississaugas of the Credit River. Today, this meeting place is still home to many Indigenous people from across Turtle Island, and we are grateful to have the opportunity to work on this land. Although we are each in different places, we are united by Daniels and U of T, and hopefully we will be able to have events in person on the land soon. So thank you everyone for joining us today. From today to next Tuesday, we will have a series of events, including events where you can ask for advice from professionals and faculty members, as well as recorded career workshops. All the information and links are available on the schedule on our Miro board, which you can find in the chat. Our event today is a niche portfolio panel, a conversation with young architectural practitioners about what it's like to work in a specialty within the architectural field and how to prepare your portfolio for one of these specialties. So today our panelists are Anusha Ramesh. She is a project manager at Boschko and Verity Inc. Kristen Smith, who is a team lead at Carlton Immersive Media Studio and specializes in heritage conservation and urban design. We also have Jamie Kwan, who's a senior service designer at CIBC. He specializes in experience design and sustainable design. And finally, we have Lily Chung. She is our studio technologist at the University of Toronto at the John H. Daniels faculty, and she specializes in custom architectural fabrication. So with that being said, I would like to invite our first guest, Anusha Ramesh, to shortly introduce herself and share her experiences with us.
Thanks, Sally. So thanks for having me here. First of all, this is really great, and it's a really nice opportunity to have as an undergrad or a graduate to be able to get a little bit more information on the various opportunities after graduation. So I graduated from Ryerson back in 2014 from the architectural science program and with a specialization in building science. I was right after I graduated, I was really keen on sticking to building science. I was adamant about getting a job with architecture firms that were focusing on net zero or passive house design, and that's what I was very passionate about at that time. But opportunities came by, and I found that my passion shifted over to construction, and that's one of the key things I wanted to mention today is to be really open-minded when you're graduating, because the field of architecture can really open up opportunities in various other industries. So I'm gonna kind of share my screen because I'll start with a little bit of visualization too. You should be able to see my screen. So I'm just gonna start by introducing construction management. This is what I do on a daily basis with Boschko and Verity Construction. So this is quite different from a lot of other contractors or construction industries firms in the city. So I started off before B&V at a general contractor. That's quite different from B&V because general contractors are typically awarded a project, or they get the project to construct, and they build exactly per the drawings and really don't work on design management. At B&V, this is construction management, and we're actually a company that was started by Waterloo architecture grads, and a lot of the employees at B&V have an architecture background, which makes a big difference because we're very focused on design and implementing the design in construction. So very, very focused on making sure the architect's intent really shows up in the construction. So this is one of our key projects, which is 180 Jeon. The first 4 floors, or the first 5 floors, were existing, and we added 2 floors, kind of renovated the existing heritage properties of it, and added another mezzanine even on top of that. So you can kind of see the way the project was completed. Early on, the building looked quite worn out. So there was an upgrade to all the windows, there was an upgrade to the building, the 2 floors added on. Everything really came together as one very special project. We worked with a really great team on this. We worked with Allied Properties, Gensler, Arup, RJC, ourselves, and almost 58 sub-trades on this project. This was a huge project, and what was really important was the amount of collaboration that gets involved in construction management. Kind of another key project I wanted to kind of show. This is a nice fancy one. It's called Gusto 501. Some of you might have heard. It's a restaurant on the East End, sister of Gusto 101. Worked with Partisans Architect on this one, Blackwell for structural, BK for mechanical. And this was a really interesting project, as you can see, because of all the masonry walls on the inside. And what people don't see is what happened before. So that's what construction management is we get on board 2 years before the project sometimes, like in Gusto, we were working with the team 2 to 3 years before, through their design, through their construction ideas, through budgeting, and went through many rounds of development with the team, that's the architect and the clients, to develop the project with them. It's a very effective process, really helps build very niche and high-end projects. I know I'm kind of running out of time a little bit, so I'll get into what you might want to do for targeting your resume. How am I doing on time, Sadat?
We're good. You can take your time.
Okay.
It's really interesting.
Okay, sounds good. So I'm just in terms of targeting your resume. This was very new to me after I graduated. So I fell into construction almost by chance, and really learned along the way on what kind of resumes stand out and what kind of information really stands out when you're applying for construction management. Key pointers here. So some things I've noticed over the past few years on when people apply for these kind of jobs. Your About Me section, as an architect or as an upcoming architect, a lot of people don't update that first paragraph to factor in your career goals or your interest in construction management or a construction firm. So really remember to update that little section at the top so people know that you're also interested and open-minded to other opportunities. Key skills in construction management are quite different from an architectural undergrad degree or an architectural job, for example. So software skills like Rhino, CAD, Revit take less importance in a construction job. They are very useful to have, the background knowledge, but highlighting your skills in like leadership or organization or communication and customer service is very, very key. And that's sort of where your soft skills shine and how to kind of give you an edge over other applicants. Project experience. So this one's a hard one because if you're just graduating and you don't have too much experience, what do you really put on your resume? So any experience is good, and experience that can really show your ability to lead a project or explaining how you've successfully collaborated with a team can really help. So even if it's a school project or an art installation, these are really good examples to show that you can work as a team. And then BIM and software. So this is really bridging the gap now between construction and and architecture and design. So as in our company at B&V, we have a BIM team that focuses on 3D scanning and looking at the potential of integration of construction with architectural designs. Like we work on quite a few heritage buildings, one or two a year, and BIM really helps us out to identify a lot of puzzles before. So that's a useful skill to have and to really showcase your abilities on that one. And then visualization. So I found in the past that this really helps in resumes. And I'm not necessarily talking about portfolios. So in construction jobs, portfolios aren't prioritized. And instead of a portfolio, what you could do is provide your resume with about 2 pages of visualization. So I'm kind of going to show you an example. I lost all my previous resume information, so I found some examples online. So I don't know who Adrian is. This is a somebody. And this is an example I found. It's a bit blurry, but it kind of gives you a bit of idea, and I'll show you an example right after of what I mean by visualizations. So education is important, relevant coursework for construction, any sort of experience that could help relate to construction. I would definitely highlight how those certain experiences helped you with some of those skills I mentioned earlier, like organization, leadership, communication, customer service. That's what construction management is all about. And as a recent grad, we all know you learn on the job. We're learning on the job every day. I myself am learning every single day. And I think that's what's important to keep in mind is we're not necessarily looking for all the experience. It's about your skills. And in terms of your software skills, you can definitely highlight that too. And then some visualizations. So what I did for some of my earlier interviews and even the current job that I have when I applied quite a few years ago was provide some visual examples. So what I did was I just somehow dug up my old portfolio from school and picked a few projects that I'd worked on. So this one was just a rendering of a passive house design. It just helps provide a little outlook into to kind of grab their attention when they're looking at your resume. You can provide a bit of a description, and you can mention how you researched passive design construction. You really got into the construction process and detailing for rammed earth walls in Canada. So this kind of gives you a bit of an edge to show that your abilities to research and look into constructability of your project. Office tower in Oakville. So this was a third-year studio design. And although the images are small, they just grab your attention. So in this one, I can talk about my ability to use Revit, the ability to understand architectural drawings. One thing to remember is when you're looking at a construction job, a lot of other graduates from other fields are also applying. So if you have an architectural background, that really gives you an edge. I think that's really important to showcase that. So the ability to read these drawings, produce the drawings, or understand the complexity of detailing is really great to show. And then kind of a nice render here to just talk about competition design. So this one, I'm probably going to talk about time management and collaboration and kind of presentation of the design in public. So just something to kind of wrap it up. But those are a couple of examples. That was it for me.
Thanks, Anusha, for your presentation. It was really informative. Does anyone have any questions for Anusha?
doing questions later, or
Sadat, do you have a question?
Yeah, I actually have a question. Um, I'm particularly like really interested in like construction, and I just wanted to know like how does a typical day at work look like for you? What are your what are the things that your position requires you to do actually?
it's a good question. So with construction management, we're working with the consultants on a daily basis. So my day ranges from talking to the subcontractors, like for example, calling the steel trade to find out how the steel fabrication is going, sometimes even reviewing the shop drawings over the phone with them or on Teams now, and then calling the architect with problem solving. There might be interferences on site or some details don't work out the way envisioned. So it's almost all day of problem solving along with a lot of budgetary questions and schedule. Schedule's a big one with COVID because we all know that's been impacted quite a bit right now. Lots of emails.
I also have a question. Did you have to take any like extra courses or do any extra schooling like specifically about construction before you like entered this field?
Not before. So I actually started at Build It by Design, which is a general contractor that specializes in restaurant builds. And I learned on the job, and from day one, I had a great mentor, and that's key. I would suggest trying to find a great mentor once you join a company to help you learn more. But what I did do was during my work, I enrolled in a couple of OBC code classes to understand the code a little better. They did teach us the code in school, but that information didn't really stick. So I enrolled in George Brown and went through like the small buildings OBC code review, so that when we were working on projects like the Gusto project, it was useful for me to know where to find some of that code information.
Thank you. Does anyone else have any other questions?
I have a question. I'm not sure where my raise hand functionality is in Zoom, at least to Teams. So in terms of construction management, there's such a broad spectrum of offices that can be very design driven and others that are very profit driven. How did you go about doing your own research to land in an office that is comparatively design driven?
I think it was part of my application process. So I did a little bit of research in the city on the different types of companies, and B&B really stood out in their website. When I first visited the website, I instantly knew, okay, this is someone who's design oriented. They're very particular on their colors and their fonts, and it's all Helvetica. So I kind of had that initial impact. But my resume at that time also carried a mini portfolio, like I was showing, which was the visualization aspect of it. And I think that really stands out for construction management. Construction management typically try to hire students or individuals with an architectural background. So they take priority to hire those with a design background. Hope that answered your question, Kristen. Yeah. I will stop the screen share.
We don't have any more questions. Kristen, you're next.
Next, okay. I'm not on mute, okay. Hello, I'm Kristen. I am also a graduate of Ryerson with Lily and Anusha. I don't have such a formal presentation to share, but I'll talk a little bit about my school experience and work experience and just some of the lessons learned and kind of interesting points for you. So I did my undergrad at Ryerson University. I graduated in 2016. And I was part of Ryerson's first co-op cohort. So in between third and fourth year, I took a complete year and got different work experience. And then following my experience at Ryerson, I moved over to Carleton for my master's degree. And I finished my master's 2 years ago at this point. And definitely the experience at Ryerson and the experience at Carleton were very different. So I think it's nice having two very different approaches to architectural education that just helps you inform your own kind of perspective towards the profession. So my work experience is quite varied. And it's still a little bit in flux. You know, I'm still trying to find the ultimate spot where I feel happy. But I'm originally from Kingston, Ontario. And so my first experience were actually just working in my hometown with a local architect. And I think that people coming from small towns have a huge advantage in that sense where, you know, it's a small place, you can knock on doors and just get some experience there. And then after going into co-op, at that time, I started to get a bit just disillusioned with all of the studios and classes and all of the studios where the only response to the design brief that was presented was to create a new building, fancy renders, full Revit model. And that didn't necessarily align with what I necessarily thought the best approaches to the design briefs were. So I took my co-op year to actually investigate landscape architecture and heritage conservation. And so in terms of landscape architecture, I worked at Plant Architect in Toronto. And then I actually came to Ottawa and worked with a group with the federal government called the Heritage Conservation Directorate. And so those two experiences were very interesting because they weren't in kind of typical design offices. And most of my time there, I actually wasn't even working with architects. I was working with landscape architects and heritage conservation specialists. And so it definitely then kind of redirected my education. We're in fourth year and then moving on into master's, where you have a bit more freedom to explore different projects that you want. I definitely pushed those projects more towards heritage and landscape architecture. And then at Carleton, I started working with a research group who actually specializes in both of those two things together, called the Carleton Immersive Media Studio. So coming out of my master's, I was really just reflecting, you know, should I dive into landscape, heritage, or work in a kind of typical architecture office? And one of the challenges that I faced with some of the previous jobs that I had was that I did want to prioritize getting my license. And in a lot of those experiences, I wouldn't have necessarily been working with under a licensed architect and getting the range of hours that I need in order to write my exams and, you know, apply for my registration. And then the second kind of hurdle that I encountered was that often the architect is the prime consultant, and you have heritage specialists or landscape architects, they're actually sub-consultants. So you're not necessarily the person who is directing the overall design approach for the project. That really falls under the purview of the architect. And so those two things combined actually led me to work with an architecture office. I'm currently working with Moriyama and Tashima. I'm working in Ottawa. They have a small Ottawa office, but of course their main office is in Toronto. And so that's where I've been for the last 2 years. And I'm, you know, slowly chipping away at my hours. And you know, we'll see where it goes from there. I can share my portfolio briefly if there's time, but
yes, we have time. It would be really great to look at your portfolio.
So can you see my screen?
Yes.
So this is my personal portfolio. I don't maintain kind of a work portfolio of office work. But this is kind of all of my work leading up to my final thesis at Carleton. And so you can see just, from the covers that it's quite a mix between, projects that are definitely large scale in nature, some fabrication, more conceptual work, installations, and then more kind of discipline focused projects. Certainly, if you have an interest in something that's maybe slightly peripheral to kind of a typical architectural course, use all of your projects, use your thesis. If you have a summer that it's a 4-month commitment because you're in between years and you have a curiosity to explore something else, my opinion is just to try something. Like going between undergrad and master's, I had several summers where I was maybe in a city that I knew I wasn't going to be living in full time or like long into the future. And there would be interesting opportunities presented. And so just, dip your feet in the water of different things. Certainly, like for landscape architecture, there's going to be similar to regular architecture, like there's renders, you have working drawings. This I completed with Plant Architect. There are some very specific heritage documentation strategies. This is photogrammetry. It is Center Block in Ottawa, the main building in Parliament. Just showing skills in that regard because it's completely different software that's used and just very different approaches. I have a mix of studio work, and then I'll just end on my final thesis where, again, kind of in the vein of if you have an interest in something, to just go ahead and do it. Similarly, like your thesis is a time to explore something that genuinely interests you. And so I just jumped into something that I had a curiosity about, and it ended up working in my favor. I did my thesis on all-inclusive resorts in the Caribbean. And it was a critique on the architecture, but also on the historical imagery of paradise, the tropical landscape. So it was a way to really bridge things together. And I'll just go through the imagery. Like it's quite abstract, but it slowly gets to a closer built scale. And I had a series of models that went with it. And so even though this thesis is not necessarily what I'm doing with Moriyama and Tashima now, it was a really interesting conversation starter, which in interviews, it's always good to have a conversation starter. And just, I think firms appreciate kind of just being different, and just, you don't need to kind of give them the answers that they necessarily want to hear, be genuine and back up your interests with good work, like dive into your projects and yeah, just make it a reflection of the path you want to go ahead and that's it for me.
Thanks, Kristen. Does anyone have any questions? Naomi?
So I actually am hoping to work at Moriyama and Tashima Architects maybe one day,
Okay.
if things pan out. But I was wondering, how is it like working there, and what's the culture, I guess?
The culture, so I think it's a really nice size of office where it is somewhere between like a boutique design office and something that is much, larger, kind of like corporate in nature. And so I think that definitely like kind of feeling out the scale of an office is important, because we can take on large institutional projects, but we don't have so many people that there's a big need to kind of take on projects that aren't interesting from a design perspective. So yeah, I think it's a great scale, and we have quite a range of projects, both in Canada, and then there's also, we do some work in the Middle East as well. The culture, I mean, I'm not in the Toronto office, I'm in the Ottawa office. And so the Ottawa office is much smaller. And so there is a little bit more of kind of a tight knit, we're just like, what are we now, 8 people, something like that. And so, those are the people who you speak to every day. And yeah, I mean, it can be really busy. And I'm on a deadline now and it's crazy, but I think that's the same honestly in most architecture offices. And it's kind of up to you to set boundaries for yourself. And that's a big thing. You need to set boundaries for yourself and kind of be your own advocate in time management, and making sure that, you know what work priorities are and such.
Thank you.
Oh, I think there's a question in the chat. Differences between approaches at Ryerson versus Carleton. So Ryerson's approach is definitely more pragmatic, in the sense that they teach you the kind of like the practical things that you need to know to get started in the industry. And so you come out of school very proficient in Revit, you understand building envelopes, you have, good understanding of building codes, zoning, and so you're off to the races in that sense. The projects are generally buildings. It gets a little more loose in 4th year. But it's, the projects progress from smaller structures all the way up to, large institutional or towers and stuff like that. Carleton was definitely, its history is a lot more artistic. And so there's definitely less of an emphasis on creating a finished building at the end of every single project. It's much more exploratory in nature, which I think is wonderful, especially at the thesis level, and allows you to be very critical of your approach to a design brief. And there's a lot of freedom in how you respond. But then on the flip side, you aren't getting quite the same level of just solid, foundational knowledge in practice. So I think that having both was really good. I can't speak for UC. That's one school I did not spend any time in.
I think we have another question in chat from Diana.
Oh. For students entering their final year of undergrad, do you have any suggestions for those still unsure about doing thesis in 4th year? So is thesis an optional thing at U of T? I'm not sure what the structure is.
Yeah, so in their 4th years, so there's different streams. I think there's like a history and theory stream, and then a tech stream, and a design stream, and then tech and design. Yeah, students do a thesis, like kind of coming up with their own project. There's usually a theme for each studio, but yeah, it's pretty open and kind of, yeah, like a master's thesis in that way.
Yeah, I mean, I can only speak for myself, but definitely having a period of time to work on a project that's completely of your own kind of creation was really liberating. And I found that time to be quite precious, actually, because you only get more and more constrained in the work that you get to do as time goes on. So I think it's a great opportunity. That's just my personal opinion. It's obviously a lot of work, but it's just a chance to dive into something that you may not otherwise have the opportunity to do.
Are there any more questions? If not, we can move on to Jamie.
Hey everybody. So I'm going to just quickly share my screen. Just my second screen. Oops. How do I move this? Hey everyone. Okay, so you can see my screen. I'm just going to talk over this for now, but just to give you a bit of I probably have the most left field path out of architecture. And when I say out of architecture, I mean I still am in architecture, but I took a very unique route. So like everyone else, I went to Ryerson for my undergrad in architecture. I graduated in 2013. Where I ended up at a small architectural design firm called Sustainable TO. And they specialized in single family residences and doing passive solar design. And, I went into that first job thinking that, I was really interested in sustainability and sustainable design. But when I got there, I learned that I didn't have as much of an appetite for the technical aspects of design. But I got to work on some pretty unique projects that are kind of at the periphery of sustainable design. And those all kind of centered around community engagement. And I got to work with a lot of neighborhoods to co-design. Specifically, I worked on a project called the East Scarborough Storefront. And we got to basically design a community center with kids. And that project I really cite as like the one that kind of steered me into a different direction and really helped me refine, what I was really interested in from an architectural design perspective. It taught me about, the human qualities of design and how people start to form pride in place through the process of design. And because of that, I decided to go back to school and not do my master's in architecture, but instead I did a master's in digital media at Ryerson. And I was really interested in learning about how digital kind of could be used as a tool in the design process. But also how we think about how space is activated through technology and through the other elements and soft elements of our spatial and built environment. And that kind of took me down this path of thinking about experience strategy, which is how I kind of describe myself. I use my portfolio website quite a bit to start conversations with people. I really leaned into the soft qualities and soft skills of my design background. And after grad school, I ended up at a company called Forec, where they specialize in theme park design. You'll know their one Toronto project called Wonderland. But I was really, really fortunate to work on some pretty cool visitor attractions and destinations around the world. I'll take you through one of the projects just in a bit. And in the theme park world kind of really taught me about designing for things like play and discovery and exploration, things that created memories in destinations, how to create experiences through spaces. And from that, I was really interested in how we can take some of those qualities and embed them in our everyday lives. So that took me to the corporate world of working at Gensler and working as part of their workplace consulting team. I was focused on employee experience and culture design and designing for innovation, essentially, and how to activate space. From there, as we mentioned earlier, I'm currently a senior service designer at CIBC, where I work on the customer and employee journey enterprise-wide through their Enterprise Digital and Innovation Group. So I'm really focused on doing research that brings human-centered design mindsets to various parts of the bank. And specifically with my architectural background, I was really interested in exploring retail banking and how that's changing in the future. Very long, weird path I took. Just to flip through my portfolio, the approach that I took at a school was really to use my website to to grab attention, to basically start a conversation and build intrigue and just get myself in the door. I thought that, you know, if I can talk my way through an interview, that's kind of how I can get a job. And, you know, for the past 3 jobs that I've had, none of them were really from a job posting. So I'm pretty fortunate to have been connected with a lot of different people and networked my way into a lot of companies. With my website, you know, I really focused on problem solving and really putting the process and the thinking behind the projects at the forefront. When at Gensler, I worked on a project with TIFF, Bell Lightbox, and transforming their year-round attraction. And basically, you know, I took the same formula of my strategic work, talking about the brief and the process. What are the questions and research questions that we were asking? This project specifically, we worked with staff and customers and members to figure out how to position the traveling exhibit space. If you were there probably 2 years ago, they had an exhibit called Picture Palace, and this was kind of working simultaneously to that exhibit space before COVID obviously hit and basically sent it all into a different world. But you see, like it's you know, a lot of process that I tried to communicate through my portfolio. To show you a bit of my when I get into the room, you know, I spend a lot of time talking about, you know, my journey, my perspective, having more soft skills from the architectural world. I really wanted to communicate my perspective and how I saw design and the mindset that I had going into design. And talking, you know, specifically about the process and where I saw myself intersecting into the design process. A lot of my work so far has been in that pre-design phase. So working with the client through visioning workshops, through participatory design, doing research with employees or customers, and really bringing data and research into the process, synthesizing it, telling a story that really sets the stage for architects and designers to really do the best work. You know, having the skills of architecture is, I think, one of the assets I bring to like weird sectors like the financial sector or the legal or professional services sector. Being able to map out a story and think spatially through drawing, through concept design, but also keeping in mind how someone is feeling through the space has helped me a lot. Oops, wrong way. Just in terms of the type of work, I always show kind of the diversity of work that I've done. So everything from visitor destinations to theme parks and water parks and visitor attractions around the world, doing more branded and retail focused work, including the office that I currently work at, and then a lot of the workplace strategy stuff. Just to take you through one of the projects, or 2 of the projects actually that I have in my portfolio. At FOREC, I was really lucky to work with the Panama Canal Authority in 2017. I worked with them for about a year at the very beginning of the project, all the way to delivering a concept deck for their tourism master plan. Essentially, I got to travel down there to really get to know what it's like to be a tourist, and do some pulse interviews, engage with their stakeholders, both externally and internally, and really immerse myself in what the Panama Canal meant to local and regional tourists. From there, we started to translate that research into what we call personas. So, you know, developing these personas from research was really kind of useful for helping guide the client through the process, because it was a year-long project. We started to use the persona names throughout the process as we're talking about, you know, design concepts. We'd think, you know, what's Roger and Betty thinking? What would they want when they're looking through this space? And we really, you know, spent some time fleshing out a story as to, you know, who these people are and how we can help the client see their project as big as the Panama Canal from the perspective of their visitors. From there, we started to translate into different concepts. This is the new experience center, so one of the visitor centers at the canal that's currently being built, I believe. It's been a while since I've touched base on this project, but essentially I was really the advocate for research and human-centered design. My work at Gensler started to be a lot more corporate. So Canadian Tire was a big client of mine. We started to look at their new space that was being developed in 2027 and how their workplace strategy can start to translate into new types of experiences for their employees and for the public realm. At the very beginning, I used a lot of my background in digital to take them through a lot of the research and current emerging trends within technology and digital media. And then we kind of started to take a more future foresight approach to helping them think about, a project that's 10 years into the future. How can we start to imagine future scenarios that, they can start to work towards? What are the preferred futures in 2027 that we can start to chip away at right now? So getting them, to think about their employees. We talked a lot about executives and what their perspective on the future of the business. And then work with employees to co-create different big ideas for the future. And ultimately, we started to translate these into guiding principles that are currently being taken into concept and schematic design. Some of these amenity spaces were not even spatial, but it was really important to us to think beyond just space and to bring, an employee experience mindset to the project. Personally, a lot of my hard skills came into play as I bridged from strategy into design. So being able to draw and think spatially and being able to render was something that helped to communicate strategy to designers who might be a lot more visual and a lot more technical. And eventually we started to work on the public realm, so the ground floor public plaza that's being currently developed. And taking it through into more concept renderings. The other part of my portfolio, and I always end this one in interviews with a lot of the passion projects that I have, part of, what I do, I really live like the values that I kind of espouse into my work. So, showing passion projects, showing side projects that aren't even technically related to the work, really helped to flesh out and give personality to my portfolio. I did a lot of work on the side with Cineplex, looking at their Gen Z market, co-creating with them and figuring out what might be the future of entertainment for kids. And we basically, for this project specifically, we took over Scotiabank Theatre for a day, and we had 50 teenagers come into the space and just think blue sky, like what is the future of the theater, and presented it back to executives. After that, a lot of my consulting background ended up making its way into these types of side projects, and being able to pull insights from kind of really kooky co-creation workshops was something that I wanted to communicate through this specific passion project. And, showing interest in other things, I had a huge interest in data visualization at some point in my career. And, this was a project that I did with a friend where, we started to just look at our day-to-day lives and start to put it into hand-drawn data visualizations and just start to push the boundaries of what my hard skills might bring. And I think that's it. Long spiel, but happy to answer any questions.
Thanks, Jamie. That was really interesting. Does anyone have questions?
I guess I was just curious about like your renderings and stuff. First of all, it was really great. Like it was so dynamic and there was so much content to process. That was really great to look at. And I was just wondering if when you're on the planning stage and you're like visualizing, are the drawings like, do you do them yourself? And just curious about them.
Yeah, so with theme parks specifically at Forac, they had a lot of internal artists and concept artists to work with. So a lot of my job was translating strategy into more visual formats. Day to day, I spent a lot of time doing like sketching and doing POVs. And a lot of the work you'll find in my portfolio was, very hand-drawn, and that was for a reason. We were really, because there was such a focus on human experience and human-centered design, being able to draw facial expressions was really important through the renderings. So, a lot of the imagery you see in the portfolio, I didn't directly draw myself, but I had a huge part in art directing and making sure that the strategy was translated into the rendering.
Therefore, it was like more of a collective effort, like worked with the team to produce all those images and everything. And
Exactly.
did you end up taking courses or anything to learn like drawing, or was the drawing part done by somebody else, or how did that work?
I mean, so I think travel has been a really important part of developing my ability to sketch and draw. At Ryerson, we have the opportunity to study abroad, and I was lucky to go to China and do a lot of travel sketching and being able to refine my ability to just draw with a pen. I think it's something that a lot of architects nowadays often miss out on, and there's such a focus on digitization that the value of hand drawing sometimes gets lost. So I think it wasn't something I explicitly taught myself. I think I have an interest in drawing and travel, and being able to draw just everyday life was something I was able to practice. But it does help with being able to work as a team and start to put what's in your head into a visual format in a meeting or in a brainstorming session.
Right. Yeah, that's great. I mean, it's the fastest way to like just put your ideas onto a paper. So
exactly. I think there's a question in the chat. Do you have a preferred rendering software or recommendations on rendering software? Funny enough, I think a lot of my jobs at Forac and Gensler, we use SketchUp a lot, and being able to just have the ability to work between digital and kind of a hand-drawn format was really useful in the type of work that I was doing. I mean, in terms of rendering software, they used Lumion quite a bit. I personally didn't do that work. But I was always helping to set up the POVs and figuring out how to add to the drawing. I believe the rendering software they used for the Canadian Tire project was Lumion as well. Another question, how do you maintain your website online presence, and how do you decide how much of the process to show versus final work? Really good question. The website is always a work in progress. I was lucky in grad school, I was able to learn how to make a really quick website. So actually a lot of it, I didn't have to, use Squarespace and pay the pretty heavy subscription fee every year to maintain that. My website has kind of evolved over the last 8 years, and every single year, I make like a small tweak to it. What I showed you today was basically the most recent iteration of it for my current job at CIBC. But it's a lot of thinking about my projects and figuring out the right way to tell the story based on where I am in my career. Problem solving was a big part of the case stories that I show on my portfolio, and making sure that a problem statement and a really compelling kind of a client story is really, really present in my portfolio. And you'll notice if you go to my website, I always start with a how might we statement. And I spend a lot of time kind of word crafting those early kind of introductory texts to set up the project. In terms of like how much process versus final work, the website specifically, I try to make sure that there's a balance of text and visuals, obviously. But I don't really, I usually put like the most photogenic work on my website just to make sure that I'm keeping in mind that the website is to start the conversation and just create enough intrigue to get that first meeting.
Hi, Jamie. I have a question for you. So can anyone hear me?
Yeah.
Cool. So alongside your website, do you also prepare some sort of like portfolio magazine when you're applying for jobs, or do you just present your website to potential employers?
Yeah, that's a great question. When I first started my career, I used to always print my portfolio, and it got quite expensive to just like mail it or to drop it off at their office or bring it into an interview. Nowadays, I typically bring a laptop and I present straight from my screen or connect it to the monitor in the meeting room. But no, my approach with my portfolio right now is I have like a Keynote file that has like literally every single project that I would ever present in any interview. And I pull from that like 1 or 2 projects and case stories that you know would really fit with the job that I'm applying for, or talking to, or whoever the company is and sector that they work in. Yeah, it really, because a lot of my career, it's been kind of all over the place. I've had to create like a bit of a strategy to be able to flex to a lot of the different types of companies I could work at. But I definitely started to adopt a more digital format. One, because not everyone accepts like a massive PDF, but also to be able to flex really, really quickly as I'm applying for work.
That's really cool. Thank you for sharing.
I think that's all the questions. Does anyone else have a question?
Sorry, I just have a quick question for Jamie. What's your teamwork situation like? For example, at CIBC, it's not an architecture firm, but on a heavy design lead there. So what's that structure like?
Yeah, actually, so at CIBC, I'm the only, obviously, architect on the team. In my last 2 jobs, I really weighed heavily into the research side. So the team that I currently work on is made up of probably 5 pretty strong like anthropologists and researchers who are really focused on kind of that front end of the process. And I'm part of kind of the other half that's composed of a lot of different design professionals from different fields. So, there's a graphic designer and a digital designer, and I kind of make up the spatial environmental design. When I was at Gensler, most of the design strategy and design research group, they all come from architecture or some kind of architectural background, because it creates a common language because everyone is an architect. So, a lot of people in design consulting at Gensler specifically, are former architects or interior designers or people who, had similar paths like me where they weren't as interested in the technical aspects of design. So it's a good mix, I think.
Thanks. It's interesting to hear.
Okay, I think that's all the questions. Thanks, Jamie. Finally, we have Lily.
Thanks. Okay, I'm gonna try to breeze through mine because I've had many questions throughout, but I was trying to hold it for the end. I love hearing about everyone's super interesting work trajectories. So let me show my screen. All right. So for those of you who haven't met me yet, I am currently at Daniel's staff, and I started in September. So unfortunately, I haven't had the pleasure of meeting a lot of you. But my role right now is called the studio technologist, which isn't a very clear title. And I can kind of say that about all the previous titles I've had in the different jobs I've had prior to this one. But essentially, I like to describe myself as a facilitator more than anything. So I'll give you kind of a rundown of my trajectory. So I graduated from Ryerson as well, in architecture, of course. And yeah, I guess kind of similar to everyone. As much as I love architecture and design, I mean, I knew I didn't want to go into an architecture firm straight out of school. And so I meandered a little bit. My first kind of gig was at this place called the Design Fabrication Zone at Ryerson. So at Ryerson, they have these zones, which are kind of affiliated with the university, but they're not actually like faculties or departments where you go take courses and stuff. They sort of like they focus on encouraging students, but also non-students, like folks from outside the university, like enabling them to pursue startups or various projects. And so, you know, there's like a zone for all these different categories, and design fabrication was one that obviously focused on supporting kind of entrepreneurial, innovative projects, I guess, with the design fabrication focus. So all that is kind of, again, sounds sort of abstract. How do I minimize this? So I'll show you some projects to give you an idea. It's been a while since I've worked here, so some projects have changed. But this one, for example, I supported. So I was basically like one of the shop people who worked at the workshop, kind of by evenings, and I supported student work, like for interior design students, but also DFC members, which again could be students, but some of them are, you know, very mature, like adults who are kind of starting, you know, maybe a side business or something like that. One of these folks was called Sugarcane. So Candace and Dwayne were the two members who, like Candace had done carnival costume design for many years. So she would like make these amazing like carnival costumes, like for back then it was called Caravana in Toronto, happens every like August or something. So she would hand like bend you know, pieces of metal to make these crazy intricate like head dress things and amazing clothing. And so they came to us saying, you know, we want to add a kind of modern or contemporary, I should say, like digital fabrication like aspects to the costumes. So these were like, this was the second collection they made with us. So a lot of these, I'm sure you guys will recognize, are sort of laser cut or 3D printed. Let me try to find, yeah, so these are like big birch ply, like laser cut pieces. These guys, actually, they weren't 3D printed. I think that was made with Warblet, which is like this foamy material. There's actually not a lot of pictures here, unfortunately. Anyway, they did some really cool stuff. So that was kind of more of an experimental thing, part of their business that they have. So every year they'll make hundreds and hundreds of these costumes for folks. But obviously you can't make a costume that intricate for everybody. So they have kind of like a special collection that's on sort of like the front page of their social media and stuff. But then they have other costumes that are similar to it that are a bit more simple and doable. So yeah, they have a website, you can order them, etc. And then others were kind of like this one, for example, is a super long-term project. These engineers are basically like, they work on connecting VR with like robotic arms, I guess. So you can just wear your VR headset and move around your controllers like you're playing a video game, and then that will like cause your robotic arm to move. And so some of their clients were, for example, like people who work on skyjacks, skylifts, you know, where you are kind of suspended off a tall building and you have to like clean the windows and stuff. Or folks, I think they were even looking into like helping folks who defuse bombs or something, because obviously it's much safer to send in a robot than a person in that kind of situation. So yeah, big range of projects, some of them with more fabrication elements than others. But yeah, so my role at first was just kind of a person in the shop who helps with the technical side of things. So they would come in with sketches or ideas, and I would say, okay, like I think it would make sense to use like this form of fabrication because yeah, maybe it's easier or better that way. Or yeah, just kind of offer creative and technical advice like that. So I really enjoyed doing that, but this was part-time at the time. So at the same time, I got a full-time at this architectural fabrication company called Eventscape. So unfortunately, I had to sign an NDA with them, so I can't actually show you any projects that I actually worked on. I was part of kind of like a special projects team. One thing I did with them is we acquired a new building when I started, and so Eventscape is a company that has designers. Everyone's kind of like a pseudo architect, pseudo interior designer, pseudo engineer. And then there's a team of project managers. And then they have these huge like workshop facilities and a full team of yeah, like workers who run machines, who build like all these projects in-house. And then there's also a team of installers who would then go on site to wherever the end location for the project was, and they would install as well. So it was a complete team for creating kind of projects that are, you know, like a scale that's not exactly architectural, but also not industrial design, like not a small object either. So yeah, like this kind of gives you an idea. So anytime you go to a building and there's something that looks kind of custom, like, you know, a piece of furniture that you don't think you could buy at a furniture store, companies like this will often be the ones who do that. So yeah, like this one I just pulled out because it actually is at a condo where my friend lives. So I thought that was kind of funny. So for example, yeah, like this kind of big custom lamp thing. There would be a team. I was part of this design team who would draft out, yeah, like the design and then detail everything. So on the website, it doesn't show you the details because that's where the money's at, I guess. But they primarily use SolidWorks, but also once like some of my peers who used Rhino started joining, we started using some more Rhino and Grasshopper later on too. This was a while ago, so back then there wasn't like, there weren't many people who were proficient at Grasshopper. So yeah, again, in the workshop, in the warehouse, they have this 5-axis CNC that was milling the foam, and then I think they're doing fiberglass and epoxy work on top of that foam to, yeah, like harden it, and some pretty cool behind the scenes work always going on there. So yeah, it was a neat experience. You can kind of walk around to the workshop and like look at the drawings together with the fabricators who are working on your project and make sure there's kind of a clear communication between all parties. So it was a lot easier than kind of being on the phone and like outsourcing, you know, the fabrication work to somewhere else and then having to wait until you hear that something went wrong, and then having to kind of backtrack and whatever. It was nice that this whole kind of team was in one spot. Yeah, that's kind of, yeah, I guess I'll leave it at that because I'm kind of going over time. But after a year of doing that, I mean, I never, I don't have an interest in going back to working in a company like that or an architecture firm, because so after that, I went back to the Ryerson's Design Fabrication Zone to work full-time because a full-time position opened up as a technical coordinator. Again, all these roles kind of don't really mean anything, but I was sort of the person who I would still give like design and fabrication advice, but more than that, I just kind of generally helped support the members. We had an office where it was kind of like a WeWork or like a co-working space. And so some people had permanent desks, and then there were also hot desks, and folks would often be working on these projects part-time, but some of them actually quit their day jobs or whatever, and then started pursuing their startups full-time. There was a mix. So there's various needs of these emerging companies. Like, yeah, like sometimes they would have clients coming in or like potential investors or whatnot, and they have to do a presentation. So we'd kind of help transform the space and turn it into a cool presentation space for them. But then other times we needed to get the room ready for like a big round of prototyping and fabricating in this small office where all these different things had to happen all at once. So you have like all these fumes from, yeah, like folks casting and stuff, or sawdust, and kind of like mixed requirements that you have to balance. And I guess I was doing like kind of administrative type technical work in terms of setting up processes for how people should like book the rooms, or yeah, like if they need to connect with mentors, we sort of go online and like start looking for folks who we think might be well suited to give talks, or like, yeah, just kind of mentor people. It was very amorphous, that job. Yeah, or we'd set up like 3D printing courses, and I would do a presentation about like how to 3D print. And of course we had 3D printers and all this stuff there that I like maintain. So I maintain the machines and then instruct members on how to use them, and then, yeah, like set up all these processes. So this is a very, very, very niche kind of line of work that I went into. And then after that, I moved to U of T to help set up a brand new makerspace at the engineering faculty called the MyHall Center. So at this point, I had kind of helped set up the workshops at Eventscape as well as Ryerson, because we were just moving. And yeah, I kind of was involved in the process for setting up the new spaces, because there's a lot of technical details that you need to know when you're setting up a workshop type of space. It's not just like a typical office, right? So then, yeah, by the point of when I got to MyHall, this was kind of my third fabrication space I had been involved in like setting up. So yeah, I was there for 2 years working with students while setting up this new place. And so again, lots of kind of administrative stuff, I guess, where we're kind of setting up our website, figuring out how, yeah, like how everything runs. Yeah, like what softwares we should use. And I know at Daniels, there's like a 3D printing submission guide or laser cutter submission guide and all that. So we were setting up all of that at the same time as running the space and making sure people didn't hurt themselves on the machines and stuff. And then as of last September, I moved to U of T. So all that said, I'll quickly run through my portfolio to give you guys an idea of how I got into all this. I guess while I was in school during summers and such, I would work on a lot of design build projects because I was really not interested in sitting down for lectures. I would always fall asleep. And whenever I was engaged, like with my hands, I was having the most fun. I think a lot of people can kind of relate to that. So yeah, these were all kind of projects done while I was in school. We had lots of great design build opportunities. Luckily, you know, there were school projects where you're encouraged to design and build a thing and then submit that as a proposal for Nuit Blanche, for example, which this project was exhibited for. So it was really helpful kind of having the time at school to be able to work on these things. I don't know why it's lagging so much. Try to get to the next page. There. Yeah, I built this website a while ago and I'm not a website builder, so I don't know how to optimize certain things. This was a come up to my room project at the Gladstone. This was sort of this project that was located inside a shipping container. This project is another example of a project I helped support while I was at the DFC. What else? Same as this one. This was on the King Street pilot project. These like planters called Parkade, because it's by the park. And then aside from my day job, kind of doing that stuff in universities, a friend of mine started this nonprofit called Toolbox, where we work with, I guess, underprivileged youth in Scarborough. So this year we had to go virtual, but before that, we would hold these hands-on workshops. I think they're usually like 10 classes per semester. And yeah, we would basically use hands-on, sorry, I'm losing my thought. We would teach these hands-on skills as a means to create like a safe community space. I mean, one focus is to actually be able to come out of it with skills acquired and like a finished product. But to be honest, like the whole point of us setting up this space was because all of us had experienced empowerment and sort of had good experiences feeling like we had agency and the ability to kind of have an impact in our community and stuff through building with our hands. Like I showed you with the design build projects that I've done, they were sort of these eye-opening experiences for me where in school or working in offices and stuff, I, you know, didn't feel as yeah, empowered. I like that word, so I'll keep using it. Let's see, what else did I have open here? That's Toolbox. Like I said, this year we had to go virtual, but that's okay because again, even though students weren't really able to make things too much with their hands, the focus was building this safe community space with the kind of creative things as the medium. And so this year we focused a lot on DigiFab. So yeah, we were kind of on Miro, on Zoom, like using SketchUp and stuff to make the files. And then Ryerson's Creative Technologies Lab, CNC cut, laser cut, etc., all of that for us. So technically the students didn't build them with their hands, but it was still a really good experience. And yeah, that's it for me.
Thanks, Lily. Does anyone have any questions for Lily?
Oh shoot, I forgot to show like my resume and stuff, but I think it's all pretty straightforward. I basically didn't show many architecture projects in my resume and just any design build projects. Yeah, or like models or things that showed more details and kind of more technical or like tactile aspects. Yeah.
I think we have a question in chat. Michelle asks, with the variety of work, how do you define yourself and keep up with the different skills and expertise needed? What fabrication and admin mentorship be the focus of your ideal career?
Sorry, I don't know why I can't pull up the chat right now. Oh, there we go. Yeah, not a very technical, technically savvy studio technologist. How do I see or define myself? I think the fabrication stuff definitely was the guiding thing that brought me here. But frankly, at this point in my life and career, I'm not as interested in that stuff as much. Like I really enjoy just the community building, and again, that's a really sad part of the fact that I started just this year during COVID and haven't been able to meet a lot of you guys. You know, but I don't know, like that I think the most exciting parts of my day are the few moments when some of you pop in on Gather Town, or you guys, you know, send me a message on Discord and we get to connect. Yeah, so, you know, right now, for me, just because I don't know, maybe this will be helpful to somebody else too. Architecture was awesome because it taught a lot of great soft skills and technical skills, which just kind of serve as a medium for me to use to, yeah, like pursue these kinds of interests. I'm also involved with the architecture lobby, if you guys know what that is. They're kind of this advocacy group for architects right now, and that really excites me because like the parts about architecture that I didn't like, that pushed me away from it, were the culture. Yeah, there's kind of there's a real sense of a lack of agency that I hear my friends in architecture firms have, where they're just kind of forced into working on projects that you know, are like capitalist driven, I guess. You know, and like the work that Jamie showed, where he was saying there, I think I forget the term you used, you were like community centered or community driven or something like that.
I forget what I said too.
Right, but yeah, like all that stuff is what happens before the project, right? Or even the decisions about policies that allow like zoning to be set up so that you know what kind of building you're allowed to build. That seems to happen before architects get their hands on it. And anyway, I don't know how I started talking about this, but I, you know, have found it really, what's the word? Really rewarding, like actually working with, yeah, like these kind of more like real projects. Yeah, I don't know if that makes sense. I also haven't worked too much in an architecture firm before though, so maybe I really don't know what I'm saying. All right, sorry I took up so much time. Yeah, I guess we're almost at 9 now. But yeah, so that, Sally, did you have some like closing questions you wanted to pose or anything like that to the group overall, maybe?
I mean, if anybody has any questions that they did not ask before that popped up. Okay. So I guess we're at the end, right, Sally?
Yeah, I think there's no more questions. So that concludes our presentations. I would like to thank everyone for coming and thank our guests for giving us their time. I also wanted to remind everyone that we have many more events coming this week that are centered around portfolios, resumes, networking, as well as our portfolio showcase. The last day to submit your portfolio for review is this Thursday, the 29th at midnight. And if you need more time to submit your portfolio, feel free to email us. So that concludes our niche portfolio workshop. Have a good evening, everyone, and we hope to see you at our other events.
That's great.
Thanks so much.
Yeah.
Everybody for joining us today. And yeah, special thanks to all our guests. It was really great to learn about different perspectives and different fields. It was really nice. It was a lot of information, and I don't know, like they were really inspiring, all of them. I'm really excited to get all this information today. I'm kind of overwhelmed too, but like, which is pretty good, actually.
I think sort of the learning kind of lesson from this was, at least for me, to kind of see how varied the fields can be when like a couple years after graduation, when you kind of take your career path, your mindset is often to get into an architecture firm. And it can be a great starting point, but like Kristen, I think, said earlier, is to really, if you're passionate about something, just take it up and go with it.
And it's interesting in my trajectory, like where I was critical of architecture roles, I'm now back in an architecture office. And so, you know, like each thing is a stepping stone. And yeah, school's a really fun time to test out different things.
For sure. Yeah, thank you so much to the organizers. I know you're lacking sleep so despite the busyness, yeah, you're doing a really awesome job putting together this series.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks. All right, enjoy the rest of your evenings.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
And I'd just like to invite the guests here today also, like, to visit our kind of portfolio review / exhibition, sort of. It would be really nice to have you guys there too. And like, if you want to make some comments on some of the portfolios, that would probably help out the students a lot too.
Yeah, I'll send the link along to them for sure. And
Guys,
yeah, maybe, if you guys have any more questions for our guests, perhaps they'd be open to me sharing their contact info with you too. And
yeah, sure. I think we have shared the LinkedIn links in our Miro board. So maybe anybody who's interested in asking them in further questions can contact them on LinkedIn.
that's true, LinkedIn works. All right, thanks so much, all of you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye, everyone.